My name is Natalie Harris. I'm 31 years old. And the day my mother asked me to apologize for things I never did was the day she unknowingly signed away her perfect wedding. But I didn't know that yet. At first, it felt like I was the one losing. It was a Tuesday morning in Austin. The kind of ordinary day that pretends it won't change your life. My coffee had gone cold beside me. Emails blinked open on my laptop. Bills sat in a neat pile, and then I saw it. An ivory envelope, gold trim, heavy cardstock, the kind of invitation that doesn't ask, it announces. I knew her handwriting immediately, sharp, pressed deep into the paper. Like every letter was carved with intention. Elaine Harris, my mother, I hadn't spoken to her properly in weeks. Not since the last phone call where she reminded me how much I owed her. But still, my chest tightened. Because no matter how old I get, no matter how independent, how accomplished, how stable, that little girl inside me still flinches when she sees her name. I opened the envelope carefully. There it was, a wedding invitation. Elaine Harris and Mark Benson request the honor of your presence. My eyes scan the words. Venue overlooking the river, black tie attire, live band, luxury catering, all of it paid for by me. But that wasn't the part that made my hands shake. It was the second card tucked behind the invitation. Smaller, simpler, personal. I unfolded it. Natalie, you are welcome to attend only if you are prepared to apologize publicly for the years of hurt you've caused me. Without that apology, you will not be admitted. I read it once, then again, then a third time. My vision blurred. Years of hurt I caused her. I was 10 when my father left, 10, and somehow in her version of history, that was my fault. My phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, but the subject line stopped me cold. Guest list confirmation important. It was from Rachel, the wedding planner, the one I hired, the one I paid. My stomach turned as I opened the email. Polite, professional, neutral tone, until I reached the line that shattered whatever illusion I had left. Per Elaine's direct instruction, if Natalie Harris arrives without issuing a formal public apology, she is not to be allowed entry. Security has been informed. Security at a wedding I financed. I dropped my phone on the table and for a second I couldn't breathe. It wasn't just rejection, it was erasure. Calculated, written, documented. She hadn't just told me I wasn't enough. She had made sure everyone else would see it too. Daniel walked into the kitchen right then, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up, Texas heat still clinging to him. He looked at my face and froze. What happened? I handed him the invitation, then my phone. I didn't trust my voice. He read slowly. His jaw tightened. Then he read the email. He didn't speak for a long time. She actually told them to keep you out? He finally said. I nodded. I hated how small I felt. I thought maybe this wedding would fix things, I whispered. That's the embarrassing part. I thought paying for everything would buy peace. Buy forgiveness, buy a mother. Daniel reached across the table and took my hand. You don't have to beg to be treated like a daughter. But it's my mother. Those words almost came out automatically. Because that's how this kind of conditioning works. You defend the person who wounds you, you protect the one who blames you, you apologize for surviving. I leaned back in my chair and memories came flooding in. Dallas. Age 10. My father's suitcase by the door, the zipper dragging closed. The silence so loud it hurt. He knelt in front of me, said he loved me, then he left. And my mother didn't cry, she didn't scream, she didn't beg him to stay, she looked at me. And she said, if it weren't for you, maybe he wouldn't have left. I carried that sentence like a stone in my chest for 20 years, every birthday she forgot, every Christmas where Carolyn got the dress she wanted and I got socks, every time she introduced me as the difficult one. Carolyn, my younger sister, golden curls, soft smile, never blamed, never wrong. If she spilled milk, it was an accident. If I breathed too loud, I was dramatic. I learned early that silence was safer. If I disappeared enough, maybe I wouldn't be the problem anymore. At 15, she promised to take us both to Galveston. I packed my bag, folded my swimsuit carefully, waited by the door. She left with Carolyn, left me a note on the fridge. House chores must be done first. I scrubbed the kitchen floor that day until my knees bled, because a part of me still believed if I did it perfectly, she would come back for me. She never did. Years later, when I started working at a diner, I saved for months to buy her a Mother's Day necklace. Silver, simple, heart-shaped charm. She opened it, looked at it, said it looked cheap, asked if I kept the receipt. But Carolyn's framed photo, that stayed on the mantle for years. That's the thing about emotional betrayal. It's never one big explosion. It's erosion, slow, steady, until you don't even recognize yourself anymore. Back in my Austin kitchen, Daniel squeezed my hand. You don't owe her an apology for existing. I stared at the invitation again, gold trim catching the light, so elegant, so cruel, and for the first time I felt something different. Not just hurt, not just humiliation, something colder, quieter, power, because every single vendor contract, the venue overlooking the river, the catering, the imported flowers, the band was signed by me. My name, my bank account. My responsibility, she wanted me erased, but legally, I was the foundation holding the entire thing up. Daniel saw the shift in my expression. What are you thinking? He asked. I folded the invitation carefully, placed it back into the envelope. I'm thinking, I said slowly, she forgot who she's been talking to all these years. For decades, she treated me like I had no power, like I was the burden, the debt, the disappointment. But she forgot something important. I grew up, and I built a life. And this time, she made the mistake of putting everything in my name. I didn't know yet what I was going to do. I wasn't ready to cross that line. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't the little girl waiting by the door anymore. I was the woman holding the keys, and she had just dared me to use them. There's something dangerous about a person who has been underestimated their entire life. They don't react immediately, they observe, they calculate, they wait. The morning after I received that invitation, I didn't cancel anything. I didn't call Rachel. I didn't text my mother. I didn't respond to Carolyn's passive-aggressive Instagram story about family loyalty. I went to work. That's what survival teaches you. Function first, break down later, but inside my head, nothing was quiet. I kept replaying her words. You owe me. Owe her what? Childhood, loyalty, silence? I had already given her money, time, energy, grace she never earned. By the time I was 27, I had sent her over $30,000. Credit card bailouts? Rent when she fell behind? Car repairs? Medical bills she claimed insurance wouldn't cover? Every transfer came with a small hope. Maybe this time she'll soften. Maybe this time she'll say she's proud of me. Maybe this time she'll stop telling people I was the reason her life fell apart. She never did. Instead, she told her friends she raised a successful daughter. Like my success was proof of her sacrifice. Never mind that I built it alone. I still remember the first time she asked for money after I moved to Austin. I was 23, new job, tiny apartment with paper-thin walls. Ramen noodles stacked in my cabinet. She called crying, said she was drowning in debt. $500, that's all she needed. 500 turned into 1,500. 1,500 turned into thousands. Every time I hesitated, she'd sigh and say, after everything I've done for you, everything she'd done. You mean blaming me for Dad leaving, calling me difficult at parent-teacher conferences, telling me Carolyn was easier to love, but I never said that out loud. Because I was still trying to win something that was never a competition. Love, 2 days after the invitation, I met Rachel downtown. Her office overlooked the river, the same river my mother wanted as the backdrop for her perfect day. Rachel greeted me with a careful smile. The kind people use when they know something uncomfortable is sitting between you. Is everything okay? She asked gently. I held up the smaller card from the invitation. Did she really tell you to stop me at the gate? Rachel hesitated. That was answer enough. She was very specific, Rachel admitted. She said it was important to maintain the atmosphere of the event. The atmosphere, as if I was pollution, I nodded slowly. And all contracts, I asked, keeping my voice level, are still under my name? Rachel turned her monitor toward me. There it was. Venue, Natalie Harris. Catering, Natalie Harris. Floral imports, Natalie Harris. Live band. Natalie Harris. Security, Natalie Harris. My signature sat at the bottom of each digital document like quiet evidence. Yes, Rachel said carefully. Legally, you are the primary client. Primary client, I almost laughed. At the luncheon last week, my mother introduced me as her financial backer. Not her daughter, not family, just a funding source. And now she wanted to parade me out for a public apology before allowing me to sit at a table I paid for. I leaned back in the chair. What happens if the primary client withdraws? I asked. Rachel's eyes flickered. There are cancellation clauses, she said slowly. Most deposits are non-refundable at this stage. but services would be halted. Halted. That word sat heavy in the air. I imagined the venue doors locked, the imported flowers never arriving, the band unloading instruments that would never be played, and my mother standing in her pale blue gown explaining to her church friends why nothing was happening. For a split second, guilt hit me. Then I remembered being 15, Galveston, kitchen floor scrubbing until my knees bled. Waiting for a car that never came back, I thanked Rachel and left. That evening, Daniel was sitting on the balcony when I got home. The skyline glowed orange behind him. "Well," he asked. "It's all in my name," I said. He nodded slowly. And she's counting on me not to do anything?" That's how control works. It assumes your silence. It assumes your fear of looking like the villain. "She thinks I'll apologize," I continued, "in front of everyone. Just to keep the peace." Daniel's jaw tightened. "You're not apologizing." I stared out at the city. "I don't even know what I'd be apologizing for." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. We both knew. I'd be apologizing for being born. The following Saturday was the church luncheon. Elaine wanted to introduce Mark properly. I almost didn't go, but something told me I needed to see her in that environment. To see how she carried herself. The fellowship hall smelled like lemon bars and overbrewed coffee. My mother wore pearls, perfect posture, polished smile. Mark sat beside her, nodding along like a decorative accessory. She stood to address the room. "This wedding," she said proudly, "will be the most beautiful event Austin has seen in years." People clapped lightly. She went on about the river view, the imported roses, the 5-course plated dinner. Then someone asked about the budget. Elaine laughed. "Oh, my daughter owed me," she said lightly. "She's finally paying it back." The women chuckled. My ears rang. Owed her, as if my existence had been a debt, as if my childhood required repayment. I caught Mark glancing at me, not with empathy, not with discomfort, just curiosity, like he was observing something mildly inconvenient. After the luncheon, my mother cornered me in the kitchen. "I don't want you discussing finances with anyone," she said sharply. "I haven't," I replied. "Good, this day is about me, don't make it about yourself." I almost laughed at the irony. She had publicly framed me as a repayment plan, but I wasn't allowed to acknowledge my own contribution. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at the dining table with the contracts spread out again. Every signature felt heavier now. For years she told me I was powerless, that I attracted trouble, that I embarrassed her, but in this situation she had handed me the leverage herself. The next afternoon she called, no greeting. "The florist says the final balance is pending." "It's processing," I said calmly. "Well, hurry it up, we can't afford mistakes." I stared at the phone after she hung up. There was never a we when she blamed me for Dad leaving. Never a we when she told the principal I was always difficult. Never a we when Carolyn mocked me at dinner. But suddenly when it came to money, that night Daniel sat across from me as I opened my laptop. "You're somewhere different," he said quietly. "I'm just thinking about canceling." The word felt electric. Canceling, I swallowed. "She told security to block me like I'm some unstable ex." Daniel leaned forward. "She humiliated you first?" Silence filled the room. I remembered being 16. A fight broke out at school. I was standing nearby, didn't throw a punch, didn't raise my voice. But when the principal called my mother, she walked into that office and said, "She's always been difficult." Always. It didn't matter what I did. In her narrative, I was already guilty. And now she wanted to recreate that dynamic in front of 200 guests. Public apology, public submission, one more performance where I stood small so she could stand tall. I closed the laptop slowly. "She's been rewriting the story of my life since I was 10, I whispered. "Maybe it's time I stop letting her." Daniel didn't smile, he didn't cheer, he just nodded. Because this wasn't explosive revenge. It wasn't dramatic. It was something more dangerous. It was quiet. Calculated, intentional, and quiet revenge. It doesn't shout, it waits. 3 days later, my mother suggested we clear the air over lunch. A diner off Aminis 35. Same place we used to go after church when I was a teenager. I agreed, not because I wanted reconciliation, but because I wanted to see if she would ever choose me without an audience. When I walked in, she was already seated. Carolyn beside her, of course. I slid into the booth. "I want to talk about the wedding," I began. "You don't need to talk," she said flatly. "You need to apologize." Carolyn smirked. Just say sorry, Nat. Why are you always so dramatic? Always dramatic, always difficult. Always the problem? I felt something settle inside me, cold, still. I've paid for everything, I said calmly. Every deposit, every contract. You're doing your duty, she replied. Duty, the word echoed. As your daughter, she continued, you owe me that much. There it was again. Oh, debt, obligation, not love, not gratitude, just repayment. I reached into my bag, pulled out the folder, set it on the table between us. These are the contracts, I said evenly. Under my name. She didn't look impressed. You wouldn't dare, she said softly. And that's when I realized something. She didn't see me as capable, she saw me as predictable, the quiet daughter. The apologizer, the one who would never burn the bridge. Carolyn leaned forward. You're bluffing? I looked at both of them, and for the first time in my life I didn't feel small. I'm not bluffing, I said. The air changed, not loud. Not explosive, just a crack, a shift in gravity. She stood abruptly. You need to grow up, she snapped. If you want to attend my wedding, you'll apologize publicly, otherwise don't bother coming. She walked out. Carolyn followed. I sat there alone in the booth. The waitress came over quietly. You okay, honey? I took a slow breath. For the first time in years, I will be. When I got home, Daniel was waiting. Well, he asked. She thinks I won't do it. And will you? I looked at the folder again, my signature glowing under the lamp. For decades, she told me I was the reason things fell apart. Maybe it was time she felt what falling apart actually meant. But revenge wasn't the goal, peace was. And sometimes, peace looks like pulling the foundation out from under someone who built their world on your silence. I didn't cancel anything that night, not yet, but I knew something had shifted. She had drawn her line, now it was my turn. And this time, I wasn't the child in the hallway watching someone leave. I was the woman holding the switch. There's a moment before you change your life where everything feels suspended. Like the air is thicker, like time is waiting to see what you'll do. For me, that moment came 3 nights after the diner confrontation. I was sitting at the dining table again, contracts spread out like evidence. My name printed in bold at the bottom of every page. Venue deposit cleared, catering paid in full, band confirmed, imported roses from Ecuador non-refundable. The total amount sitting in those pages could have been a down payment on a house. Instead, it was funding the wedding of a woman who wanted me escorted out by security. My phone buzzed, another message from her. The seating chart needs final approval, handle it. No greeting, no acknowledgement, just command, handle it. That's what I had been my entire life. The handler, the fixer, the daughter who absorbed everything so she wouldn't have to. Daniel walked into the room and stopped when he saw my face. You're there again, he said quietly. Where? At the edge. I didn't answer because he was right. I was standing at the edge of something I'd never done before, choosing myself. And that terrified me. You don't undo 30 years of conditioning in a dramatic burst. You undo it in silence, in the way your hands stop shaking, in the way your voice stops apologizing automatically. I looked up at him. What if I don't go? I asked. He frowned slightly. Don't go to the wedding? What if I'm not even here? That's when the idea shifted from fantasy to plan. Daniel sat down across from me. You're thinking about canceling? I shook my head slowly. No, I'm thinking about leaving. The room went still. Leaving how? What if on the morning of the wedding we're somewhere else? He stared at me for a second. And then something clicked in his expression. Like where? I swallowed. The Maldives? I don't know why that word came out of my mouth, maybe because it was the opposite of everything she represented. Open water, endless sky. Freedom without permission. Daniel didn't laugh, he didn't dismiss it. He pulled out his phone. You're serious? Yes. He searched flights quietly, the screen reflected in his eyes. 10 days, he said. We could be on the beach by sunset? My heart pounded so hard I could hear it. I wasn't canceling, not yet. I wasn't calling vendors. I wasn't making threats. I was doing something quieter. I was removing myself. If she wanted to humiliate me publicly, she would have to do it without me present. We booked the tickets that night. 2 one-way seats to peace. When the confirmation email arrived, I just stared at it. Flight departing 6:10 a.m., wedding day. Return date 10 days later. The final payment processed. No going back. My hands trembled, not from fear, from something that felt suspiciously like power. The next week felt unreal. My mother called almost daily, payment confirmations, last-minute demands, guest list adjustments. Each time I responded calmly, "Yes, it's handled. Yes, the deposit cleared. Yes, security has the list." Security. The irony didn't escape me. She had arranged security to keep me out. And now she had no idea I was arranging something far more devastating. Silence. The night before the wedding, she called again. "The photographer needs confirmation." "It's confirmed," I said evenly. "Good, don't embarrass me tomorrow." The line went dead. Don't embarrass me. For years, I carried that sentence like a threat. Now it felt like prophecy. Daniel and I packed quietly. No dramatic speeches, no last-minute doubts, just folded clothes, passports, sunscreen. When I zipped my suitcase shut, it sounded like closure. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Memories flickered in the dark. 10-year-old me in the hallway. 15-year-old me scrubbing floors. 16-year-old me sitting in the principal's office while my mother said I was always difficult. 31-year-old me holding the contracts that built her wedding. I whispered into the dark, "You don't owe her anything." And for the first time, I believed it. At 4:30 a.m., we loaded the car. The city was quiet. Austin before sunrise feels almost gentle. Like it hasn't decided who it wants to hurt yet. My phone buzzed as we pulled onto the highway. Her name lit up the screen. I let it ring. Then Carolyn, then the planner. I turned the phone face down in my bag. I wasn't ready to see the unraveling yet. At the airport gate, Daniel squeezed my hand. "Last chance," he said softly. I looked at him. No, not angry, not dramatic, just certain. We boarded. As the plane lifted off the runway, I felt something inside me detach. Not from her, from the version of myself that kept begging, the one who waited for approval, the one who believed love required endurance. Hours later, when we landed in Malé, the air felt different. Warmer, saltier. The ocean stretched out in impossible shades of blue. The boat ride to the resort was silent except for the hum of the engine and the sound of water cutting against it. I closed my eyes and let the wind hit my face. Somewhere across the world, my mother was stepping into her wedding dress. Somewhere across the world, guests were checking directions to the venue. Somewhere across the world, everything was perfectly in place. For now. The next morning, we had breakfast on the deck of our overwater bungalow. The ocean moved lazily beneath us. Daniel raised his coffee cup. To freedom, I clinked mine against his. To choosing ourselves. And then I picked up my phone, 43 missed calls, 9 voicemails, 27 messages. My pulse spiked. I opened one from Rachel. "Natalie, please call me immediately. Vendors are being denied entry. There seems to be an issue with authorization." Denied entry. I opened another from Carolyn. "What did you do?" All caps, no greeting. I scrolled from my mother. "You are disgusting. You've ruined everything. Guests are here. Where are you?" My breath came faster. Daniel watched me carefully. "What's happening?" I swallowed. "Nothing is set up." The realization washed over me slowly. 3 days before the wedding, after our diner conversation, I had logged into every vendor portal, every contract, every account, and I had quietly toggled one setting: authorization required on day of execution. Primary client approval mandatory. That was me. And I had boarded a plane. No dramatic cancellations, no screaming phone calls, just absence. Vendors arrived at the venue. No authorization, no final release. No access to funds, no setup. Guests arrived to an empty hall. No flowers, no catering, no music, just locked doors and confusion. My mother had wanted security to stop me at the gate. Instead, the entire event stopped itself. I stared at the screen as more messages poured in. "Mark is furious." "The church ladies are asking questions." "Mom is crying." For a split second, guilt flickered. Then I remembered her words at the diner. "You owe me," I whispered to myself. "Not anymore." That afternoon, we walked along the shoreline, the water warm around our ankles, the sky endless. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing. I wasn't preparing a defense. I wasn't explaining myself. I was just existing. But revenge, it doesn't feel the way people think it does. It's not fireworks. It's not screaming satisfaction. It's quiet, heavy, a strange mix of relief and grief, because part of me still wanted a mother, and that part had just accepted she would never exist. That evening, I finally listened to one voicemail. Her voice cracked with fury. Do you have any idea what you've done? Mark walked out. Guests left. Everyone is talking. You humiliated me. Humiliated, the word echoed. For decades, humiliation had belonged to me. Public apologies, side comments, comparisons, today it belonged to her. I deleted the message before she finished. Daniel wrapped his arms around me from behind. You didn't destroy her wedding, he said softly. She destroyed it when she tried to erase you. The sun dipped below the horizon. The sky burned orange. And for the first time in my life, I felt like the narrative had shifted. She had spent 30 years telling everyone I was the reason things fell apart. Now the world was watching her version fall apart without me even being there. Silent revenge, not loud, not messy, just the removal of access. And sometimes that's the most powerful move of all. The strange thing about silence is that it echoes louder than screaming ever could. The morning after the wedding collapsed, I woke up before Daniel. The ocean outside our bungalow was calm. Still, like nothing dramatic had happened anywhere in the world, but my phone was heavy in my hand, heavy with consequences. I hadn't turned it off. I wanted to see it, not because I wanted to suffer, but because for the first time, the chaos wasn't mine. I opened the news app first, and there it was, a local Austin headline. Luxury riverfront wedding collapses after vendor authorization failure. My stomach tightened. There was a photo. The venue doors closed, guests clustered outside in confusion, and in the corner of the frame, my mother, still in her pale blue gown, hair perfect. Smile gone, mouth open mid-argument. For decades, she had curated her image like a museum exhibit. Polished, controlled, admired. Now she looked exposed. The article was careful, neutral tone. It mentioned financial authorization complications. It noted that vendors were unable to proceed due to a contractual dispute. But it also mentioned something else. Witnesses reported the bride blaming her daughter for the disruption. I let out a slow breath. Of course she did. The pattern never changes. But this time there were witnesses, real ones. Guests who saw the empty hall, vendors who knew the contracts, staff who heard her yelling. This wasn't a private family narrative anymore, it was public. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't from her, it was from Aunt Patricia, I answered. Natalie, she asked gently, I'm here. There was a pause. Are you safe? Safe. No one had ever asked me that before. I'm fine, I said quietly, she sighed. Your mother is telling everyone you sabotaged her out of jealousy. But not everyone is believing it. I closed my eyes. Who believes her? Carolyn, obviously, a few church friends, but the vendors are talking. People are asking why everything was in your name. That part hit differently. Everything was in my name. For years, she hid that, downplayed it, made it sound like I was helping. Now it mattered. Patricia lowered her voice. Some people are starting to question why she demanded a public apology in the first place. There it was. The cracks, small but spreading. After we hung up, Daniel came out onto the deck. He looked at my face and didn't ask what happened. He just sat beside me. They're talking, I said. Good, he replied, not cruel, not vindictive. Just factual. The rest of the day passed in strange contrast. We snorkeled, bright coral, fish flashing silver and blue beneath the surface. Above water, the sun warmed my skin. Below water, everything moved in quiet harmony. No shouting, no accusations, no demands. I floated on my back at one point, staring at the sky, and I realized something uncomfortable. I wasn't just angry at her, I was grieving the version of a mother I never had. Because revenge doesn't erase longing, it just changes its shape. When we returned to the bungalow, I saw a voicemail from an unfamiliar number. I hesitated before pressing play. Miss Harris, this is Attorney Collins. I represent Elaine Harris regarding the contractual disruption of her wedding. We need to discuss financial obligations. Daniel looked at me sharply. She's threatening legal action? I replayed the message. The tone was formal, careful, but there was something missing. Confidence. I knew those contracts, I knew the clauses, authorization required, primary client discretion. Everything I had done was legal, calculated, documented. Still, the idea of a courtroom tightened my chest, because she had always used authority against me, principals, counselors, relatives. Now she wanted to use lawyers. Daniel took my hand. She can try, but you didn't break the contracts, you enforced them. He was right. But trauma doesn't vanish because logic exists. That evening at dinner, something unexpected happened. A couple at the table beside us leaned over. "Excuse me," the woman said carefully. "Are you Natalie Harris?" My body went still. "Yes," she smiled softly. "We saw the article, we just wanted to say that took courage." I blinked. Courage? I had spent my life being labeled difficult, dramatic, ungrateful, never courageous, her husband nodded. "Standing up to family like that isn't easy," I swallowed. "Thank you." After they left, Daniel watched me. "You see it now, don't you?" "What?" "The story isn't hers anymore." That night I couldn't sleep, not because of guilt, because of realization. For 31 years I let her define the narrative. I was the reason Dad left. I was the difficult child, I was the embarrassment, I was the ungrateful daughter. Now, people were asking questions, not about me, about her. And she hated that more than the canceled wedding. The next morning I received the message I knew was coming. From her, not rage this time, not screaming, just a single text. "You are no longer my daughter." I stared at it for a long time. Daniel watched me carefully. "What does it say?" I handed him the phone. He read it, then looked at me. "Are you okay?" I expected to feel destroyed, to feel cut open. Instead, I felt something else. Clarity, because that line, it had always been there, unspoken. She had emotionally disowned me when I was 10. She just finally said it out loud. I typed a response, then deleted it, then typed again, and erased it. Finally, I locked the phone and placed it face down. No reply, silence. That was my answer. Later that afternoon, Aunt Patricia called again. "She's telling everyone you've been unstable for years," she said quietly, "that you've always resented her happiness." I laughed softly, unstable, resentful. The vocabulary of someone losing control. "Do people believe her?" I asked. "Less than she thinks." That was enough. On our last evening in the Maldives, Daniel and I sat at the end of the pier, feet dangling over dark water. The sky melting from orange to purple. "What happens when we go back?" he asked. I thought about it. There would be whispers, glances at the grocery store, family messages, maybe legal letters, but something fundamental had changed. "I won't shrink," I said finally. He nodded. "That's it." And that's when it hit me. The real revenge wasn't the wedding collapse, it wasn't the public embarrassment, it wasn't the articles, it was this. I no longer needed her approval. She could disown me, threaten me, rewrite history, but she couldn't reach inside me anymore. Because the little girl waiting by the door, she had finally walked away. When we landed back in Austin, the air felt different, not heavier. Just honest. There's something about returning to the place where you were once small after you've learned how to stand tall. The city hadn't changed. The skyline was the same. The coffee shop on 5th still had the chipped blue sign. The grocery store parking lot still smelled like asphalt and heat. But I had changed. And that meant everything was about to feel unfamiliar. I turned my phone off airplane mode before we even left the gate. The notifications poured in. More articles, more opinions, more messages from relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years, some angry, some curious, some surprisingly supportive. One headline stood out. "Bride's daughter listed as sole financial authority in wedding contracts." That detail mattered, because it shifted the narrative from emotional drama to factual structure. She hadn't been blindsided by a jealous daughter. She had willingly handed control to the very person she claimed was unstable. And people were noticing. By the time we reached our driveway, my voicemail was full again. But there was no message from her, just silence. The kind of silence that means someone is regrouping. I unpacked slowly that night. Folded clothes back into drawers, placed the seashell I'd picked up in the Maldives on my dresser. A reminder, I wasn't running anymore. The next morning, I went to work. I own a small but growing consulting firm, contract structuring, financial compliance, vendor negotiation. Irony has a sense of humor. As I walked into my office, my assistant looked up carefully. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I said calmly, and I meant it. Clients had seen the news, but not one of them canceled. In fact, 3 new inquiries had come in overnight. People who said they admired how I handled a complex situation. Complex, that was one way to describe it. By noon, I received the official letter from Attorney Collins, formal, polite. It stated that Elaine Harris was considering legal action for financial damages caused by intentional disruption. I read it twice. Then I opened my laptop. Every contract was stored in my secure cloud drive. Every clause highlighted, every authorization timestamp recorded. I forwarded the letter to my own attorney, a woman I'd worked with for years. Her response came quickly. This is posturing, she has no standing. If anything, she exposed herself to liability by publicly accusing you without basis. Liability, the word felt sharp, because for the first time in my life she was the one at risk, not me. 2 days later, the real shift happened. A long-form article was published in a regional lifestyle magazine. The journalist had interviewed vendors, guests, even 2 members of the church committee. The story wasn't cruel, it wasn't dramatic, it was measured. It outlined how the bride had insisted her daughter fund and manage the entire wedding. It mentioned the public demand for an apology at a rehearsal dinner. It described the authorization requirement that halted the event. And then it ended with a quote from an anonymous guest. Sometimes the loudest humiliation comes from realizing you needed the person you tried to erase. I read that line 3 times, needed the person you tried to erase. That was it. That was the truth. She had built her wedding on my labor, on my credit, on my competence. And she assumed I would show up no matter how small she made me feel. But I didn't, and that's what broke the illusion. The following Sunday, I did something unexpected. I went to church, not because I needed forgiveness, but because I wanted to reclaim the space where I had once felt ashamed. Whispers followed me down the aisle. I felt them. But I didn't lower my eyes. I sat in the 3rd row, head high. When the service ended, a woman I barely knew approached me. I'm sorry, she said softly. For what? For believing things about you that weren't fair. I studied her face. There was no pity there, just honesty. Thank you, I replied. Across the room, I saw my mother. She was standing with Carolyn, her posture rigid, her smile thin. For a split second, our eyes met. This was the first time since the wedding collapse. There was no shouting, no dramatic confrontation, just distance. She walked toward me slowly. Carolyn stayed behind. Natalie, she said quietly, her voice lacked its usual edge. Yes, a pause. You embarrassed me. I didn't flinch. You tried to erase me. Her jaw tightened. I am your mother. And I was your daughter, I replied calmly, not your employee. The air between us felt electric. People nearby pretended not to listen. She glanced around, then lowered her voice further. You could have handled this privately. I held her gaze. I tried, at the diner. The memory flashed between us, the apology demand. The threat of security, her lips pressed together. For the first time in my life, she had no script, no authority figure to hide behind, no crowd automatically on her side, just reality. I will not apologize for protecting myself, I said evenly, and I will not fund or manage anything for you again. The boundary felt solid, like stone. She inhaled sharply. You're choosing to end this relationship. I shook my head slowly. No, I'm choosing to change it. Silence stretched. Then she did something I never expected. Her eyes flickered just slightly, not tears, but something close to uncertainty. You've always been dramatic, she muttered. I smiled softly. No, I've just always been quiet. And then I walked away, not rushed, not shaken, just steady. In the weeks that followed, the narrative settled. Some relatives distanced themselves, others reached out privately. My father called for the first time in years. I heard what happened, he said carefully. I'm not surprised. That sentence carried decades inside it. We talked longer than we ever had. Not about her, about me, my business, my life, the future. It felt like reclaiming a missing chapter. As for my mother, she didn't sue. The attorney's letter was never followed by action. Because facts don't bend for pride, she stopped calling, stopped texting. The silence this time wasn't a punishment. It was acknowledgement. She understood something fundamental now. Access to me was no longer automatic. Respect was required, and that terrified her more than public embarrassment ever could. One evening, months later, I stood in my office after everyone had left. City lights glowing through the windows. I thought about the little girl in the hallway. Waiting, hoping, trying to earn love through obedience. I whispered into the quiet room, you did enough. Because that's what this was really about, not revenge, not humiliation, not headlines. It was about ending the cycle of shrinking to survive. Silent revenge isn't loud, it doesn't scream, it doesn't destroy for sport, it simply withdraws the privilege of access. And sometimes that's the most devastating move of all. If she ever remarries, if she ever hosts another event, if she ever tries to build something on my shoulders again, she'll remember what happened when she mistook my kindness for obligation. And that memory will be permanent. As for me, I wake up differently now, not bracing, not rehearsing conversations in my head, not scanning for criticism. I wake up calm because power isn't about control, it's about choice. And I chose myself for the first time. And that's a comeback no one can take away.